The kind of look she gave him wasn't the kind of fear you see in kids afraid of flying. It was the look of someone who had already seen it happen. Titan knew it too. His ears went forward, his tail froze, and a low, uneasy rumble started deep in his chest. Outside the big glass windows of Gate C-27, the rain streaked sideways across the tarmac, smearing the silver fuselage of the jet they were about to board. Officer Mark Davis had been a cop for 12 years, a K-9 handler for 7, and he'd learned one unshakable truth. When Titan acted like this, something was wrong. It was supposed to be a routine afternoon shift at Denver International Airport. Just the usual. Walk the concourse, let Titan sniff a few random bags, smile for tourists who wanted a picture with the handsome police dog. Mark liked the airport detail. No car chases, no high-speed pursuits, just crowds, coffee, and his four-legged partner who could detect a tennis ball from 50 feet away. But the weather had other plans. Out beyond the terminal windows, gray clouds stacked like bruises in the sky. The Rocky Mountains were half hidden in sheets of rain, and thunder kept rolling in slow, lazy rumbles. Travelers hustled through the terminal with hoodies pulled tight, hauling suitcases like they were dragging stubborn toddlers. Titan padded along beside Mark, his black and tan coat gleaming even in the low light. They were halfway past Gate C-27 when the dog stopped dead. Not a casual pause, not the "I smell pretzels" pause, a full, braced shoulders, ears up, muscles tight freeze. Mark followed Titan's gaze. A girl sat cross-legged on the carpet near the window, maybe 10 years old, dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, pink rain jacket zipped up to her chin. Her mother, tired eyes, messy bun, oversized denim jacket, sat beside her, scrolling through her phone. The girl wasn't looking at her mother. She was staring at the plane outside like it was wrong. Mark took a step closer, Titan moving with him, nails clicking on the polished floor. The girl's eyes shifted to the dog, and for a second it was like she recognized him. She pushed herself up, walked straight over, and without asking, wrapped her arms around Titan's neck. Mark crouched down. "Hey there, he's friendly, don't worry." The girl's voice came out as a whisper, but the words stopped him cold. "Please, don't let that plane go." Her mother shot up, face flushing. "I'm so sorry, officer. She gets nervous about flying. She didn't mean anything." Mark smiled politely, but Titan's stillness told him this was no normal meet and greet. The girl kept her arms locked around the dog, her cheek pressed into his thick fur. "Promise me," she said. "Promise you won't let it take off." They were called over the PA. Now boarding flight 482 to Seattle, all rose. Passengers began lining up at the gate. The mother gently pulled her daughter away, murmuring something Mark couldn't hear. Titan stayed watching them, nostrils twitching, gaze darting between the child and the jet parked outside. Mark told himself it was just a scared kid, but he'd been a cop too long to ignore that feeling. And right now it was crawling along the back of his neck. They made another pass down the concourse. Titan kept glancing back toward Gate C-27. It was starting to get under Mark's skin. He checked his watch. Still an hour left on his shift. Maybe he was just bored, reading into things. Then the girl's voice came again. She had broken away from her mother and was standing in the middle of the gate area, raincoat unzipped now, fists clenched. When she spotted Titan, she ran. She nearly slammed into him, dropping to her knees and clutching his harness and like she was afraid he'd disappear. Her eyes were wide and glassy, her breath coming quick. "Titan knows," she gasped. "Please tell them. Tell them not to go." "Hey!" Mark put a hand out, glancing up to see her mother hurrying over, apologizing again, but less forcefully now. "What's wrong?" he asked. The girl shook her head, looking past him toward the big windows. "Something bad's gonna happen. I saw it. I saw the wing. I saw—" Her voice broke off. Titan made that low, rolling growl again, the one he used when someone was getting too close to a suspect. Mark straightened, scanning the plane outside. Nothing obvious, rain beating on the metal, ground crew rolling carts, the kind of scene he'd seen 100 times before. But Titan wasn't buying it. "Come on, honey," her mother urged, but the girl didn't move. Passengers were still boarding. The jet bridge door stayed open, people disappearing down it with carry-ons and coffee cups. Mark's training told him to let it go, but his instincts told him something else entirely. And if you love real stories where animals make the difference between disaster and safety, make sure you subscribe to Heroes for Animals, because sometimes heroes have 4 legs and a nose that can save lives. The gate agent made the final boarding call announcement. Mark watched the last few passengers step forward, scanning their passes. That's when Titan barked. Not a stranger near the handler bark, not the playful one he used when kids waved at him. This was short, loud, and full of intent. Heads turned. Even the gate agent froze, half smiling like she wasn't sure if this was some kind of TSA stunt. The girl clung tighter to Titan's harness, sobbing now. It's going to fall. It's going to fall. Mark felt the decision tightening in his chest. He knew what would happen if he made the call, and it turned out to be nothing. Paperwork, embarrassment, maybe a talk with the captain. But he also knew what happened if he ignored his dog's instincts. Ma'am, Mark said to the gate agent, hold boarding, now. The agent blinked. Excuse me? Stop boarding the flight. This is a K9 alert. Her eyes widened. She picked up the phone, murmuring into it. Passengers in line began murmuring too. The ones already on the plane wouldn't know what was happening. The ones still outside looked at each other like, did we just dodge something? Mark didn't answer their questions. He kept a hand on Titan's harness, the dog's body tense, gaze fixed on that plane like it was the only thing in the world. The girl stepped back, wiping her eyes. You believe me, she said. Mark nodded once. I believe him, he said, giving Titan's neck a firm scratch. Her mother swallowed hard. Thank you, she whispered. Rain hammered the glass harder, drowning out the hum of conversation in the gate area. Somewhere deep inside, Mark knew, whether this turned out to be a mechanical glitch, a false alarm, or nothing at all, he'd rather be wrong 1,000 times than right just once after it was too late. He radioed his supervisor. This is Davis at C-27. We have a potential safety concern on Flight 482. K9 alert, requesting maintenance inspection before departure. The reply crackled back. Copy that. Hold position until cleared. Mark exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. Titan didn't ease at all. His eyes stayed locked on that jet, tail stiff, a low rumble still thrumming in his chest. Within minutes, 2 uniformed maintenance crew members arrived with tool bags, heading down the jet bridge. Mark stepped aside with Titan, letting them work. The girl stood a few feet away now, calmer, but still watching. Titan glanced at her once, then back at the plane, like he understood they were on the same side. The rain kept coming, the crowd at the gate thinned, and in the back of Mark's mind, a question took root, a question he wouldn't get the answer to until much later. How could a 10-year-old girl in a K9 who had never once boarded a passenger plane both know that something wasn't right? The rain outside gate C-27 had settled into a steady hiss, like static on an old TV. The windows were streaked with water, turning the lights on the tarmac into long smears of yellow and white. Somewhere out there, a baggage cart beeped as it backed up, its taillights blinking in the gloom. Mark stood just inside the glass, Titan planted solidly at his left. The German Shepherd hadn't moved in minutes, except for the occasional twitch of his nose. The plane for Flight 482 sat maybe 30 yards away, silver skin glistening under the floodlights. Maintenance crews had been on board for 15 minutes now. Mark couldn't see what they were doing, and nobody was offering explanations. The gate agent had switched her microphone off, fielding questions from restless passengers with a polite but clipped smile. The little girl was still there with her mother sitting in a pair of plastic chairs against the wall. She was calmer now, at least on the outside, but her eyes kept drifting to Titan. Mark tried to tell himself that was a good sign. A few more minutes, the crew would come back with a clean bill of health. The flight would board, and this whole thing would be a false alarm. Still, his gut wasn't convinced, neither was Titan. When the first mechanic returned up the jet bridge, Mark caught the man's expression before he could hide it. It wasn't relief, it wasn't fear either, it was uncertainty. The mechanic spoke quietly with the gate agent, who nodded, glanced toward Mark, then picked up her desk phone. A few minutes later, Mark's supervisor, Sergeant Tom Harlan, arrived. Tom was tall, broad, with that slightly windburned skin you get from working outside too long. He stepped over, eyes scanning the area. What's going on, Davis? He asked. K9 alert on the aircraft, Mark said simply. Tom looked at Titan, then at the girl, then back at Mark. What exactly did he alert on? That's the thing. No drugs, no explosives, but he's locked in on this plane since we walked by. And the girl, she's convinced something bad's going to happen. Tom's brow creased. A psychic kid? Mark shrugged. Don't know what she is, but I've learned not to ignore my partner when he's this sure about something. Before Tom could answer, the second mechanic came out. This one carried a small flashlight and a notepad, and his voice was just loud enough for Mark to catch. "We need to run a deeper check on the wing assembly. Can't see anything obvious, but—" Mark didn't hear the rest. The man had already dropped his voice. The passengers still waiting in the gate area were starting to buzz. Some were on their phones, texting whoever was supposed to meet them in Seattle. Others stared out at the rain like they could will it to stop. One man in a business suit walked over to Mark. "Is there some kind of security threat? Should we be worried?" Mark kept his tone even. "Sir, right now the flight is just under routine inspection. If there's anything to tell, you'll hear it from the airline." The man didn't look reassured, but he went back to his seat. Titan suddenly shifted, ears swiveling toward the far end of the concourse. Mark followed his gaze, half expecting to see another officer or maybe a suspicious bag. Instead, it was just a janitor pushing a mop bucket, the wheels squeaking against the tile. Titan's ears went back toward the plane a moment later. Mark knelt, rubbing the dog's neck. "All right, boy, what's eating you?" Titan's eyes stayed on that aircraft, as if waiting for it to make the first move. By now, the little girl had edged closer again. She wasn't hugging Titan like before, but she hovered a few feet away, hands stuffed in her raincoat pockets. Mark glanced at her mother, who gave a weary nod, like she'd given up trying to keep her daughter in her seat. "You want to tell me why you think that plane shouldn't go?" Mark asked gently. The girl bit her lip. "You'll think it's dumb. Try me." She hesitated. "Sometimes I see things before they happen." Mark kept his expression neutral. "Like what?" "Like my grandma falling down the stairs last year. Like my neighbor's car accident. I saw them in my dreams first. And this time," she swallowed hard, "this time I saw that plane in the sky. I saw the wing shake. I heard a loud crack. Then," she stopped. Mark waited. "Then what?" The girl's eyes dropped to the carpet. "Then it fell." Before Mark could respond, Sergeant Harlan stepped back over. "Davis, come here." Mark joined him a few feet away. "Mechanics want more time. They're not saying much, but I know that look. They found something they don't like." Mark glanced at Titan, who was now sitting but still focused on the aircraft. "You want us to hold the area?" Mark asked. "Yeah, and keep people calm. Last thing we need is panic." 20 more minutes dragged by. The rain outside thinned, but the clouds hung low and heavy, lit from beneath by the airport floodlights. Finally, the head mechanic returned. He looked like he'd aged a year in the last half hour. He spoke to the gate agent, who immediately announced over the PA, "Attention passengers on Flight 482 to Seattle. This flight has been canceled for maintenance. Please see the desk for rebooking options." The reaction was immediate. Groans, complaints, people standing up and shoving bags into the aisle. A few cheered quietly, relieved. Mark noticed the girl didn't move. She just exhaled, slow and deep, like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. Titan's posture relaxed for the first time all afternoon. When the gate finally cleared out, Mark walked over to her and her mother. "Looks like you were right," he said softly. Her mother's eyes were wide. "They wouldn't say why, just told us the plane can't fly tonight." Mark nodded. "Sometimes they keep that under wraps. But you should know, your warning might have saved a lot of people." The girl didn't smile. "It's not me," she said. She reached down, scratching Titan behind the ears. "It's him." He knew. Mark looked at his partner. "Maybe you both did." As they left the gate, Mark's radio crackled. "Unit 12, report to maintenance hangar 3. Aircraft 482 inspection complete, requesting your presence." Mark frowned. They didn't usually call security down for maintenance results. He exchanged a glance with Harlan, who'd heard the same call. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Harlan asked. "If you're thinking it's not over yet, yeah." Titan trotted alongside them as they made their way through the service quarters toward the hangar. The smell changed from coffee and perfume to oil and wet concrete. The sound of the rain grew fainter, replaced by the hum of industrial lights. Inside, the silver body of the 737 loomed over them, one wing stretching out into the shadows. A set of portable work lights illuminated the left wing route, where 3 mechanics stood with clipboards. The head mechanic waved them over. "Thanks for coming. Figured you'd want to see this." He crouched, pointing to a spot on the metal where several panels had been removed. "We ran the standard checks, found nothing. Then we ran a deeper structural scan. And here," he tapped the metal with a gloved knuckle, "we found a microfracture in the main wing joint, hairline thin buried in the composite layer. You can't see it without the right equipment." Mark let out a low whistle. "Could it have—" The mechanic nodded grimly. "At altitude? With turbulence? That wing could have failed. You'd be looking at a catastrophic event. Harlan glanced at Titan. Guess your partner earned his dinner tonight. Mark crouched, rubbing Titan's chest. The dog leaned into him, content now that the threat was gone. He looked back at the mechanic. Any idea how it happened? Not yet. Could be material fatigue, could be stress from a hard landing. But here's the kicker. Our systems didn't flag it. Without a specific reason to check this joint, we'd have missed it. Mark felt a chill despite the warm air in the hangar. He thought of the girl's words, of Titan's unshakable focus. You had a reason, he said quietly. As they walked back toward the terminal, the rain finally stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing a thin slice of moon over the runways. The girl and her mother were gone, probably rebooked on a morning flight. But Mark couldn't shake the way she'd said, I saw it. Titan glanced up at him, tongue lolling now, the danger behind them. Yeah, boy, Mark murmured. I don't get it either, but I'm glad we listened. Mark had been on the job long enough to know when a story wasn't finished. Sure, the mechanics had found the microfracture, the plane was grounded, and the passengers were safe. But something about the whole situation clung to him like the damp smell of the rain-soaked tarmac. It wasn't just the fracture, it was how they found it. Without Titan's unshakable fixation, without that little girl's trembling voice, Flight 482 would have been in the air, slicing through the dark over the Cascades. And maybe it wouldn't have made it. Mark had just reached the parking level when his phone buzzed. It was Sergeant Harlan. Hey, Davis, that kid, you get her name? Mark hesitated. No, Maintenance filed their report. Upper Command wants a statement on what tipped you off. They're asking if we can follow up with the passenger. Mark glanced at Titan in the backseat of the cruiser. The shepherd sprawled on his blanket, but with one eye cracked open, watching. I'll see if I can find her, Mark said. The next morning, the airport was a different beast entirely. The storm had blown through, replaced by crisp blue skies and that early autumn chill that makes coffee taste better. Mark signed Titan out from the K-9 unit office, clipped on his harness, and they headed for the terminal. The flight board still showed a cancellation notice for Flight 482, now rescheduled for a completely different aircraft. The old one was still in the maintenance hangar. Mark stopped at the ticket counter, flashing his badge. Morning, yesterday, Gate 27, Seattle flight. I'm looking for a passenger. Little girl, about 10, dark hair, pink rain jacket. She was with her mother. The agent tapped at her keyboard, her expression polite but guarded. Sir, I can't give out passenger details. I know, Mark said. But this is connected to a safety incident. We just need a name to complete our report. She hesitated, then typed a bit more. I can confirm they were rebooked on a morning flight, and they're probably already gone. Sorry, gone. That didn't surprise him. People like that, the ones who didn't want attention, didn't hang around for reporters or interviews. Still, it bothered him. He'd wanted to thank her, not just for speaking up, but for trusting him enough to say something at all. Back at the K-9 office, Titan lay on his mat, gnawing his favorite Kong toy. Mark sipped his coffee, scrolling through the maintenance report on his tablet. The words were dry and technical, but the meaning was clear. Microfracture in the composite layer of the left wing root. Risk of catastrophic structural failure in turbulent conditions. Cause undetermined. He closed the file. There was one line in the report he couldn't stop reading. Inspection initiated following K-9 handler's safety alert based on passenger observation. It was bureaucratic language, but he could read between the lines. Without that girl, the fracture would still be hidden inside a machine that looked perfectly fine. That night, Mark took Titan for a long walk along the South Platte River Trail. The city lights reflected in the water, and somewhere in the dark, a freight train rumbled past. You've had some weird calls in your time, haven't you, boy? Mark said. Titan glanced up, his breath puffing in the cold air. Mark remembered the warehouse job 2 years ago. Titan had refused to clear a section of crates, even though the narcotics tests were negative. Later, they found a false bottom filled with fentanyl pills. Or the domestic disturbance last summer. Titan had blocked a suspect from going back inside to get his wallet. Turned out the guy had a loaded revolver under the couch cushion. The dog's instincts were sharper than any checklist. But this was something different. Titan had never reacted to a plane before. The next afternoon, Mark stopped by the hangar. He wasn't on duty there, but curiosity pulled him in. The 737 sat on heavy maintenance jacks, panels open like a surgeon's patient. A mechanic he recognized, Dan, a 20-year veteran, waved him over. You were the canine guy yesterday, right? Mark nodded. Dan wiped his hands on a rag. Thought you'd want to know. We've seen fractures before, but never in that exact spot. Whoever caught that, well, they saved a lot of lives. Mark glanced at the gaping wing assembly. Could it have been spotted during a normal inspection? Dan shook his head. Not unless you had a reason to look there. It's buried in composite layers. Even our system didn't flag it. Mark thought about the girl's words. I saw it. I heard the crack. As he left the hangar, his radio chirped. Unit 12, respond to Terminal East. Baggage claim level. Possible unattended bag. Request canine sweep. Copy, Mark replied, heading that way. The call turned out to be a false alarm. A college kid's duffel left unattended while he chased down a ride. But as Mark and Titan wrapped up, he heard a voice behind him. You're the dog guy. He turned. The little girl from yesterday stood there, rain jacket gone, wearing a faded hoodie and jeans. Her mother was a few steps back, holding a boarding pass. You're hard to find, Mark said. Her mother smiled faintly. We were heading out yesterday, but I wanted to let her see him again before we go. The girl stepped forward, crouching to hug Titan. He leaned into her side like they'd known each other for years. You were right, Mark told her. They found something wrong with the plane, something serious. The girl didn't look surprised. I know. Her mother's eyes flickered, pride mixed with concern. Mark crouched so they were eye level. Can I ask, how did you know? The girl hesitated, then glanced at Titan. It's like a dream, but not just when I'm asleep. Sometimes I see things before they happen. Not everything, just the bad stuff. Mark kept his voice calm. That's not exactly something you can prove to people. She shook her head. Most people don't believe me, but he did. She scratched under Titan's chin. Dogs know when you're telling the truth. Mark stood. You ever tell anyone else? A teacher, a friend? Her mother answered for her. We keep it quiet. Too many people would think she's making it up or worse. Yesterday, she couldn't stay quiet. Mark understood. He'd seen what happened when people went public with things that couldn't be explained neatly. Thank you, he said. From me. From everyone on that plane. The girl smiled for the first time. I didn't do it alone. They left for their gate. Titan watched them go until they disappeared into the crowd. Mark clipped the leash back on. All right, partner. Guess we'll never know how she saw it. But we know you did your part. Titan's tail thumped once, and they headed toward the exit. That night, the news ran a 30-second segment on the canceled flight. Routine maintenance inspection uncovers hidden structural defect. Airline says passengers were never in danger. Mark knew better, and he knew it wouldn't be the last time Titan's instincts, and maybe a little human intuition, would keep something bad from happening. 3 days after the Flight 482 incident, Mark thought things might settle down. The paperwork was filed, the official statement sent, and his sergeant had even bought him and Titan lunch for good instincts. Still, it felt too quiet, the kind of quiet you don't trust. That Friday morning, Denver International bustled like normal. The stormy skies from earlier in the week were gone, replaced by crisp sunshine pouring through the terminal's high-glass ceiling. Coffee lines stretched down the concourse. Kids dragged carry-ons plastered with cartoon stickers. And the security checkpoint churned like a slow-moving river. Titan was in a good mood, tail swishing as he walked at Mark's side. His harness gleamed, the big yellow police canine patch catching the light. People smiled at him as they passed, some snapping quick pictures. Guess you're the celebrity now, Mark murmured. They had just finished a sweep of the baggage claim when the radio on Mark's shoulder crackled. All units, respond to Concourse B, Gate B12. Gate agent reports possible disturbance with passenger. Request K9 presence. Mark acknowledged and turned toward the escalators. Titan followed, his nails clicking on the metal grating. Gate B12 was halfway down the concourse. Even before they reached it, Mark could feel the shift in atmosphere. Travelers slowing their steps. A murmur of voices, the gate agent looking tense behind the counter. A man in his 40s stood near the boarding door, arms folded, jaw tight. His backpack lay on the ground beside him. 2 TSA officers were already talking to him, but it was the other figure in the scene that stopped Mark cold. The little girl from Flight 482. She was standing a few feet away with her mother, her small frame stiff, eyes fixed on the man. She didn't notice Mark yet, but Titan had already spotted her, and something in his posture changed. His tail lowered, ears forward, muscles taut. Mark approached the TSA officers first. What's going on? One of them leaned in. Guy tried to board without a proper ID. Says he lost it yesterday. Gate agent got suspicious, called us. He's agitated, but nothing illegal on him so far. Mark glanced at Titan, who had started to circle slightly, nose testing the air around the man's backpack. The girl's mother saw Mark then. "Officer Davis," she said in surprise. "We didn't expect to see you again." Mark nodded politely, then crouched toward the girl. "Hey, kiddo, you okay?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze flicked to Titan, then back to the man near the boarding door. "It's him," she whispered. Mark frowned. "What about him?" Her voice dropped even lower. "Something bad is going to happen on that plane because of him." Mark straightened, his mind racing. This was different from the wing fracture. This was a person, and her certainty was the same. He looked at Titan, who had now positioned himself between the man and the girl without being told. The dog's hackles weren't up, but his body was a spring wound tight. "Sir," Mark said to the man, "mind if we run a quick check on your bag?" The man shrugged. "Knock yourself out." Mark gave the search command, and Titan went to work, sniffing methodically, moving around the bag, then stopping at one side. He froze, head low, tail stiff. Mark felt his pulse quicken. That was Titan's pay attention posture. The TSA officer took the bag and began emptying it onto the inspection table. Clothes, a toiletry kit, a paperback novel, nothing out of the ordinary. Then the officer unzipped the bag's lining and pulled out a heavy duct tape package. The room seemed to go still. The officer peeled back a corner of tape, revealing a tangle of wires and a small blinking light. "Clear the gate," Mark barked. Passengers scrambled back, the gate agent hitting the emergency stop on boarding. TSA grabbed the man, pushing him against the wall and cuffing him. Bomb squad was called in within seconds. Mark moved the girl and her mother farther down the concourse. Titan stayed close, eyes scanning the crowd even after the suspect was led away. 20 minutes later, the all-clear came through. The device had been inert, a non-functional mock-up, but realistic enough to pass for the real thing at first glance. The suspect was being questioned about his intentions. Mark found the girl sitting with her mother on a bench. It wasn't a bomb, he told them, but it could have caused a serious panic. "How did you know?" The girl hugged her knees. "I just saw him walking toward the plane, and I remembered my dream last night. I saw him in the aisle and people were screaming. I don't know why." Her mother put an arm around her. "She doesn't get these feelings often. But when she does," she trailed off. Mark nodded slowly. "Well, between you and Titan, you stopped him from getting on that flight. Whatever would have happened, it's not happening today." They parted ways again, the girl giving Titan one last scratch before disappearing into the crowd. As Mark walked back toward the K-9 office, he kept replaying the look in her eyes, the same unwavering certainty she'd had at gate C-27. Titan patted beside him, relaxed now, tail swinging again. "You're 2 for 2, partner," Mark said. "Guess we'd better be ready for number 3. Later that evening, Mark sat at his kitchen table with a cold beer, the news playing low in the background. The report about the Gate B-12 incident was vague, calling it a security precaution and a non-credible threat. No mention of a 10-year-old girl, no mention of a K-9 officer whose dog had been first to zero in on the suspect's bag. And that was fine. Mark didn't need headlines. He needed to understand how a kid he barely knew had now twice been in the exact right place at the exact right time, and how Titan seemed to understand her without a word spoken. Before heading to bed, Mark let Titan out into the backyard. The dog sniffed the night air, then settled onto the porch, eyes scanning the dark like he was still on duty. Mark leaned on the doorframe, the cool air on his face. "What's the connection, boy? You and that kid, you're seeing something the rest of us can't." Titan didn't answer, of course, but when he looked back at Mark, there was that same steady gaze he'd had at CO27, the kind that said, "Trust me." And Mark did. It had been a week since the Gate B-12 incident, but Mark couldn't shake it. The guy with the fake device was still in federal custody. The airline had quietly thanked him and Titan, and Sergeant Harlan had made a crack about maybe hiring that kid as a junior detective. Mark had laughed at the time, but the truth was, it didn't feel like a joke. That Saturday afternoon, Mark was at home, tinkering with the old Harley in his garage. The crisp fall air drifted in through the open door, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke from somewhere down the street. Titan lay on his side near the workbench, occasionally lifting his head to track a passing car. Mark was elbow deep in the bike's carburetor when he heard it, the faint crunch of footsteps on his driveway. Titan's head shot up, ears forward. A second later, a small voice called, "Officer Davis?" Mark wiped his hands on a rag and stepped to the open door. There she was, the little girl from the airport, standing at the edge of his driveway, clutching the straps of a faded backpack. Her mother wasn't with her, For a moment, Mark just stared. How did you? She gave a small shrug. I asked the lady at the coffee shop by the airport. She said you live in this neighborhood. Mark glanced down the street. No car, no bike. You walked here? She nodded. It's not far. Titan trotted over to her, tail wagging just enough to show recognition. She dropped to her knees and hugged him tight. I need to talk to you, she said without looking up. Mark's cop instincts kicked in. Does your mom know you're here? Her silence was answer enough. He sighed, gesturing toward the porch. All right, let's sit down. Then you're calling her before she calls me. She sat on the steps, Titan pressing against her side. Her small hands fidgeted with his collar. It's going to happen again, she said. Mark crouched in front of her. What is? She looked up at him, her eyes steady in a way that made her seem much older than 10. Something bad, at the airport. I don't know when, but soon. Mark studied her face. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't making it up for attention. She was just, sure. You had another dream, he asked. She nodded. But this time it wasn't just one thing. I saw a man drop a bag and walk away. I saw Titan find it. And I saw people running. Mark's jaw tightened. Could you tell where it happened? The floor was shiny, like the main terminal, and there was a big clock. He exhaled slowly. Listen, I can't. He stopped himself. What? Tell her he couldn't act on something she saw in a dream? 2 weeks ago he might have. But she'd been right twice now, and Titan had backed her both times. Okay, he said finally. You did the right thing coming to me, but you can't just show up here without your mom knowing. Where is she? The girl hesitated. At work. She cleans rooms at the hotel by the interstate. She thinks I'm at the library. Mark rubbed a hand over his face. All right, we're calling her now, and then you and I are going to figure out how to keep an eye out for whatever this is. Her mother's voice over the phone was a mix of relief and frustration. She promised to come pick her up in 20 minutes. That left Mark just enough time to get a little more information. Anything else you remember? He asked. The girl thought for a moment. There was an announcement, a man's voice. It said something about a gate change. Mark jotted that down. Okay, we'll be ready. When her mother arrived, she looked tired but grateful. I told her not to bother you, she said, but she insisted. Mark shook his head. She's not bothering me. She's helping me keep the airport safe. Just next time, let me know first. The girl hugged Titan one more time before getting into the car. I'll see you soon, she said. Mark had a feeling she was right. 2 days later, it was Monday afternoon when the call came over the radio. All units, Terminal East, near the central clock tower. Suspicious bag, owner not located. Mark's stomach sank. He and Titan were already in the terminal. They cut through the crowd, the shepherd weaving gracefully between rolling suitcases. Near the giant clock, a crowd had formed. TSA agents were pushing people back from a duffel bag sitting unattended on the polished tile floor. Mark stepped forward. K9 coming through. Clear the area, he told the agents. Give us space. He gave Titan the search command. The dog circled the bag once, twice, then froze nose an inch from the side pocket. His body went rigid. Mark's pulse kicked up. We got an alert, he called to TSA. The bomb squad was on scene within minutes. Mark and Titan backed away, watching from behind the security line as the techs in heavy gear worked. This time the threat was real. Inside the bag was an improvised device, crude but functional. The bomb squad dismantled it safely, but the chatter among the officers was grim. The placement in such a public area could have caused chaos. Mark scanned the crowd. No little girl this time, just travelers, some filming with their phones, others hurrying away. Later, as the scene cleared, Sergeant Harlan came over. That's 3 now, Davis. You realize we're going to get questions about why your K9 keeps being in the right place at the right time. Mark gave a humorless smile. Yeah, I've got a few questions myself. That evening, Mark drove past the girl's neighborhood. He didn't stop, just slowed enough to see her sitting on the porch steps, Titan's favorite kind of tennis ball in her hands. Somehow he wasn't surprised. She looked up as his cruiser passed, and for a moment they locked eyes. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She just nodded, like they both knew what the nod meant. As he pulled away, Mark realized something. Whatever connection she had to these events, Titan was part of it. And the next time she came to him, he wasn't going to wait for the radio to tell him she was right. The airport at night had its own personality. Gone were the crowds of midday, replaced by scattered travelers with tired eyes and too much carry-on luggage. The announcements over the PA echoed farther. the hum of the moving walkways louder against the quieter backdrop. Mark preferred it this way. Fewer people meant fewer distractions for Titan, and fewer chances for something to slip past unnoticed. But tonight wasn't routine. Ever since the clock tower bag incident, Mark had been expecting something. It was 9:18 p.m. The call came over his radio. Unit 12, possible security concern, Concourse C, report of an unaccompanied juvenile in restricted area near gate C14. Mark's hand went automatically to Titan's harness. Copy, en route. He didn't know why, but his gut told him exactly who that juvenile was. When they reached C14, two airport security officers stood near a closed service door. One of them looked relieved to see Mark. She's inside, he said. Wouldn't tell us her name, but she says she's looking for you. Mark stepped forward. Let her out. The door cracked open, and there she was. The girl, clutching her backpack, cheeks flushed. Titan's ears perked instantly, and his tail gave a single thump before settling again. You're not supposed to be here, Mark said, trying to keep his voice calm but firm. I had to, she replied. It's going to happen soon. Mark exhaled slowly. What's going to happen? She glanced toward the darkened gate area. A man, big coat. He's going to go through that door, she pointed toward the jet bridge entrance. But he's not supposed to be on the plane. Mark looked at the two security officers. Either of you see anyone matching that? One shook his head. Not yet. Only a couple of maintenance guys passed through here. The girl shifted uneasily. It's not yet, but it's close. Mark crouched so they were eye level. You can't just wander into secure areas, kiddo. You know that. I know, she said softly. But you told me once. If I see something, I tell you. This is me telling you. He studied her face. No panic, no dramatics, just certainty. The same kind that had grounded a plane and stopped a man at gate B12. All right, Mark said finally. You stick with me. Don't move unless I tell you. Her small hand found Titan's fur like it was second nature. The shepherd shifted slightly, positioning himself between her and the rest of the concourse. They waited. The concourse was quiet except for the occasional rolling suitcase and the soft hiss of the ventilation. Titan's head turned once toward the jet bridge, ears twitching, then back toward the main walkway. Then he stiffened. Mark followed his gaze. A man in a heavy brown coat had just turned the corner, walking with purpose but keeping his head low. His hands were buried in his pockets. Mark stepped forward, blocking his path. Evening, sir. Can I see your boarding pass? The man froze for a fraction of a second before forcing a smile. Sure, just trying to make my flight. He handed over a crumpled slip. Mark scanned it. Gate C9. Nowhere near here. This isn't your gate, Mark said. Why are you at C4? The man shrugged, got turned around. Titan's nose was working overtime now, inhaling deep and steady. His tail was rigid, his eyes locked on the man's midsection. Mark didn't like it. Sir, I'm going to need you to step over here with me. The man hesitated, then bolted. Stay here, Mark barked over his shoulder as he and Titan lunged forward. The shepherd surged ahead, his paws thundering on the tile, cutting the distance in seconds. He leapt, latching onto the man's coat and driving him sideways into the wall. Mark was there an instant later, grabbing the man's wrists and wrestling him to the ground. The coat fell open, revealing a rectangular package strapped under his arm, wires visible even in the dim light. Clear the area, Mark yelled toward the security officers. They hustled the girl back around the corner. Within moments, more officers arrived. The man was cuffed, the device carefully removed by the bomb squad. It turned out to be another inert replica. No explosives, but realistic enough to raise alarms. After the scene was secured, Mark found the girl sitting on a bench, Titan lying protectively at her feet. You okay? He asked. She nodded. I told you it was close. Mark sat beside her. So, you realize you probably saved a lot of people tonight. Again. She glanced at Titan. We both did. Her mother arrived not long after, breathless and clearly shaken. I told you to stay home, she scolded, but there was relief in her eyes. Mark stood. She didn't make it easy for me, but she made the right call. You've got one brave kid. Her mother hugged her tight. She's always been different. Most of the time, I try to keep it quiet. But maybe it's not something to hide anymore. Mark didn't reply. He was thinking the same thing, but also about the fact that someone had twice now tried to get something onto an aircraft. And both times, this girl and Titan had been right there to stop it. As they left, the girl looked back at him. It's not over yet, she said. Mark frowned. What do you mean? She hesitated then. There's one more, bigger than all the others. Then she turned and walked away with her mother, Titan's gaze following until they disappeared into the crowd. That night, Mark stood in his kitchen long after midnight, the lights off, a cup of cold coffee in his hand. Titan lay nearby, chin on his paws, eyes open. Bigger than all the others, Mark repeated quietly. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew one thing. When it did, he and Titan wouldn't be waiting for permission. They'd be ready. The snow had started sometime after midnight. By sunrise, Denver International was wrapped in a soft white haze, the kind that muffles sound and makes the runway lights look like distant stars. Mark stood in the K9 unit office, sipping burnt station coffee, watching the snow through the window. Titan sat at his feet, tail curled neatly around his legs, eyes half-lidded but always alert. The past 3 weeks had been a strange pattern. Incidents that seemed unrelated on paper but connected in ways Mark couldn't ignore. And at the center of them all, a 10-year-old girl who could somehow see things before they happened, and a police dog who reacted to her like she was speaking his language. At 8:42 a.m. the call came in. All available units respond to Concourse A, Gate A31. Multiple reports of suspicious activity near pre-board security. Possible coordinated threat. Mark's stomach tightened. Copy. Unit 12 responding. Titan was on his feet before Mark finished the transmission, already reading the urgency in his handler's voice. The concourse was a hive of movement when they arrived. TSA agents stood in a tight cluster near the gate. Passengers were being redirected to nearby seating areas. The gate agent looked pale, and there she was, the girl, standing with her mother near the agent's podium, scanning the crowd with unblinking eyes. She spotted Mark and Titan instantly. "It's here," she said without preamble. "What's here?" Mark asked, moving closer. Her gaze flicked toward the boarding area. 2 men, one with a black carry-on, the other with a silver briefcase. "They're going to try to get on that plane. If they do—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "It's not just the plane this time. It's the terminal." Mark felt the shift in his gut, the same one he'd felt at gate C27, the same one he'd felt before Titan found the bag at the clock tower. "Stay with your mom," he told her, then gave Titan the search command. The shepherd moved into the boarding area, weaving between travelers, nose low, tail stiff. He passed a row of seats, ignored a pile of coats, then locked in on a black carry-on near the window. Titan froze, then sat sharply, his trained signal for a positive alert. Mark signaled TSA to secure the bag's owner, a tall man in a dark jacket who tried to protest loudly as they led him away. But Titan wasn't done. He pulled toward the other end of the gate, nose twitching, until he reached a silver briefcase resting at a man's feet. The shepherd stopped, gave a short, sharp bark. Mark stepped in immediately. "Sir, I need you to step away from the case." The man hesitated, then bolted for the nearest exit. 2 uniformed officers tackled him before he'd gone 10 feet. Within minutes, the bomb squad had the area locked down. The black carry-on contained a complex electronic device disguised as a laptop. The silver briefcase held a chemical component that could have turned the device into a large-scale improvised explosive. The girl had been right again, but this time the scale of what they'd stopped was staggering. As the bomb squad worked, Mark moved back to where she stood with her mother. "How did you know there were 2 of them?" he asked. She hugged her backpack tighter. "Last night I dreamed about the plane, but this time I saw the whole room. I saw Titan find one bag, then run to another. I heard something break, like glass, and then there was fire. I woke up before it got worse." Mark glanced at Titan, who was now calmly watching the bomb techs in their heavy suits. "You know, kiddo," he said, "most people would say that's impossible." She looked him dead in the eye. Most people wouldn't have listened. By late morning, the threat was neutralized. The suspects were in custody, and the FBI had arrived to take over the investigation. Passengers were rebooked, and the concourse was slowly returning to normal. Mark filed his preliminary report, then found the girl and her mother in the quieter seating area near the terminal's big windows. Snow still fell beyond the glass, softening the edges of the runways. "I guess this means it's over," Mark said. The girl shook her head. "Not for me. I'll still see things. But maybe now I know I'm supposed to tell someone." Her mother gave a small, grateful smile. "You've been the first to take her seriously without making her feel strange." Mark looked down at Titan. "Well, I've got help. He's a better judge of character than I am." The shepherd leaned into the girl's leg, accepting her last scratch behind the ears. When it was time for them to go, she turned back once. "If it ever happens again, You'll believe me? Mark nodded every time. Then she and her mother walked toward the security checkpoint, swallowed up by the stream of travelers. Later, as Mark and Titan headed for the parking deck, the PA system echoed overhead. Attention passengers. Final boarding call for Flight 312 to Seattle, Gate C9. He glanced at Titan. No alerts today, partner. The shepherd gave a quiet huff, as if to say, not today. For the first time in weeks, Mark believed it. In the K9 lot, he unclipped Titan's harness and let him hop into the back of the cruiser. The snow was still falling, but the sky was starting to brighten. Mark rested his hand on the dog's head. We did good, buddy. We kept people safe. That's what we're here for. Titan's tail thumped once against the seat. They pulled out of the lot, the airport disappearing in the rearview mirror. Somewhere in the terminal, flights were boarding, coffee was brewing, and people were hugging loved ones goodbye or hello, never knowing how close they'd come to disaster. Mark didn't need them to know. He just needed to be ready for the next time. And he knew without question that when it came, he wouldn't be facing it alone. Thank you for following Titan's story. If you were in Mark's shoes or in Titan's paws, and someone you barely knew warned you about a danger you couldn't see, would you believe them or would you wait for proof?